Debt is invisible until you miss a payment. That is the trick. A cage made of steel announces itself. A cage made of debt looks like an apartment lease, a diploma, a car key, a credit card, a mortgage approval, or a number glowing on a banking app. It does not need guards at the door. It only needs due dates. This is unseen hand. And tonight, the question is not whether debt is good or bad. The question is darker. What happens when debt stops being a tool and becomes the operating system of modern life? Most people do not enter adulthood through ownership anymore. They enter through permission. Permission to rent if the landlord likes the credit report. Permission to drive if the lender approves the loan. Permission to study if the debt is signed before the first paycheck exists. Permission to buy a home if 30 years of future labor can be converted into a mortgage today. That is the first layer of the matrix. Before you build your life, the system prices your future. It turns years you have not lived yet into collateral, and then it calls that freedom. For most of human history, debt was not an abstract number. It was personal, brutal, visible. Ancient rulers sometimes had to cancel debts before society tore itself apart. Rome watched debt swallow small farmers and push citizens into dependency. Europe built debtors' prisons, where unpaid obligations became locked rooms. In the American South after slavery, sharecropping kept families tied to store credit, crop liens, and balances that somehow rolled into another year. The tools changed. The pattern did not. The bars disappeared. The ledger remained. Modern debt is cleaner. It wears better clothes. It has apps, dashboards, rewards points, and friendly emails that begin with congratulations. Congratulations, you have been approved. But approval is not the same as freedom. Approval means the system has inspected your future income and decided it can extract from it. This is the mechanism nobody teaches clearly. Debt pulls tomorrow's labor into today's economy. A student loan pulls years of future work into one semester. A mortgage pulls decades of future paychecks into one house price. A car loan pulls future commutes into one vehicle. A credit card pulls next month's wages into this month's groceries. Buy now, pay later pulls Friday's paycheck into Wednesday's checkout cart. Each product looks separate: education, housing, transportation, consumption. But underneath, they are all the same machine. Future time converted into present purchasing power, with interest attached. That is why debt feels normal. It is built into every doorway. You want shelter? Sign here. You want school? Sign here. You want transportation to reach the job that pays for the transportation? Sign here. You want an emergency cushion because wages did not keep up with prices? Sign here. The matrix does not say no. It says yes with terms and conditions, and that is more powerful. A system that says no creates resistance. A system that says yes creates dependency. This is where the rat race begins. People imagine the rat race as working too much, but the deeper trap is not work itself. The deeper trap is obligated work. Work that has already been claimed before it arrives. The paycheck lands. Then the invisible hands move first. Rent, loan, card, insurance, phone, subscription, interest, late fee, minimum payment. By the time the worker touches the money, much of it has already passed through the machine. So the person works again. Not because they are building wealth, but because stopping would expose the structure. Miss one payment and the polite interface changes tone. Grace period, penalty APR, collections, default, eviction, repossession, credit damage. The mask drops. The soft cage reveals the hard edge underneath. This is why the credit score matters so much. It is not just a number. It is a financial passport. It helps decide the apartment you can rent, the price of a car loan, the mortgage rate you receive, sometimes even the utilities you can open without a deposit. You are not only being measured by how much money you have, you are being measured by how reliably the system can expect you to obey the schedule. Lose a job, get sick, help family, fall behind. And the system does not read context. It reads delinquency. The old creditor needed your name, your face, your land, your village. The modern creditor needs a database. And once life is filtered through databases, freedom becomes conditional on a profile. But the darkest part is this. Debt is not outside the economy. It is the economy's bloodstream. Banks create loans. Loans create deposits. Deposits become spending. Spending becomes income. Income services loans. The loop feeds itself. Debt is not just something people owe. Debt is something the system needs. That is the paradox. Individually, everyone is told to get out of debt. Collectively, the economy panics when debt stops growing, so the system teaches morality at the bottom and dependency at the top. Be responsible, pay what you owe. Do not live beyond your means. But when banks, corporations, or governments hit the wall, the language changes. Liquidity support, emergency facility, restructuring, stimulus, too big to fail. For ordinary people, debt is a moral test. For institutions, debt is infrastructure. That is the reveal. The matrix is not debt itself. Debt can build homes, businesses, bridges, and futures that would otherwise never arrive. The matrix begins when every path to a normal life requires borrowing from that future first. When survival is financed. When emergencies become credit card balances. When education becomes a lifelong payment. When housing becomes a leveraged bet. When the score becomes more important than the person. When the cage no longer needs walls because the exit has an interest rate. And once you see it, the world looks different. A city skyline becomes a forest of mortgages. A shopping mall becomes a harvest field for revolving credit. A university becomes a machine that turns hope into principal balance. The matrix was never green code falling down a screen. It was amortization tables. It was minimum payments. It was the quiet terror of autopay failing at midnight. So what is the escape? Not pretending all debt is evil. That is too simple. And simple answers are how people get sold another trap. The first escape is seeing the difference between debt that buys freedom and debt that rents your future back to you. A tool expands your options. A trap reduces them. The second escape is understanding that the system profits most when obligations are fragmented. One payment feels manageable. 10 payments become a climate. The final escape is memory. Remember that debt cages have existed before. Debtors' prisons, company stores, sharecropper ledgers, payday loans, credit scores, different costumes. Same question. Who owns the next hour of your life? Because that is what debt really measures. Not dollars, hours, days, years. Debt is a claim on time, and the modern world is covered in claims. The question is not whether you are inside the matrix. The question is, how much of your future has already been sold to keep the present running? If you felt the machinery behind the money, subscribe to Unseen Hand. Because the most powerful systems are not the ones hidden from view. They are the ones we are trained to call normal.